what's up, Headspaces? VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. And you know, when we're in this beautiful backdrop, we're talking topics, hip-hop conversations, everything revolving around the state of the culture we love called hip-hop. Particularly up in Mzansi, it's the Headspace, South Africa's most poignant hip-hop podcast. Yeah, Takesa's right there doing his thing. Yeah, we got a lot of we got some fam in the spot tonight.
No Elias
No Elias out there, Fritz is out there, so I'm not alone. Yeah, but we always come live and direct, united as fam, connecting together. Now guys, I want to talk about something very important. And you know what actually really Keza brought about this topic?
Yeah.
Just above and beyond hip hop. Y'all remember a hobo nigga who's been like who's been like profiled around social media for his bonga
My life has been pre-orchestrated and predestined by God. Where God says yes, no one can say no. Where God opens, none can shut.
Yeah.
You know, who's kind of there and living his life in this decrepit condition of being in the streets.
BONGA.
And people capturing Ubonga only because they ask themselves the question, how could the motherfucker with such a command, charismatic and affluent, accentuated command of the English language be in the streets? And this for me was an interesting thing to interact, because there's a lot of people who live in the streets, yo. Like, we know them, we live around them. But what makes Ubonga special is that his command of the English language felt so unbelievable for people to connect that with living in the streets. And I think there's something there for us to zoom into. The fact that we think that a command of the English language, that an articulation of this colonial power that has rested so deeply in our imagination and has centered itself as the power of how we perceive the world. You know, and I think a lot of this is something that we don't usually register in our deep brains of how we look at the world. The fact that Abelungu Bafika created a whole universe that we now live in really does determine the constructs of how we envision the possibilities of who we are. The fact that I'm speaking in English because I'm conveying an audience which primarily is supposed to understand the message that I'm allegedly bringing in a way that's broad enough for everyone to understand. And English is their common denominator. Says a lot about what we've been through historically as a people, especially because of the color of my skin. So I want to talk about how these intersections of history, blackness, being African, play into a subtle level of politics that hip-hop heads don't always realize are at play when they judge who's dope and who isn't. And primarily for me, it's this whole idea that because of the colonial history, we've learned to revere English, and thus we've learned to revere cultures outside of our own scope presented to us in English, i.e. the American culture, as high-level archetypes of excellence. Hip-hop came to us as a culture which navigates around blackness, but we hear rappers who speak in the English language, even though they've turned the English language upside down into a slang, an ebonics, quote-unquote, that talks to us as a people in ways that even stretch the possibilities of what English can become, to the point where we could even question, is it even English anymore? But the fact is that it came in ways that weren't directly immediate to the kind of language we spoke. For all of you watching as South African viewers, whether Ubwa Sesotho, Setswana, Xhosa, there is a dynamic at play for all of us who've grown up in our indigenous context, Chivenda, what have you, that when we hear English, based on the proximity of what we've been through, English always presents itself as a hierarchy of power. And as a result, English always comes through in a way that directly filters into our imagination in a way that subjects us. And when I say subject, I don't mean like you're enslaved by the English language. I just mean that because of the way that colonialism manifests itself in the fact that the power of industry and commercialization and thus capitalism and all the brands you like and all the music you like is in the background controlled by white people. Kanye West would probably say white Jews. You know, there is a kind of interplay into the fact that we cannot escape that a lot of what we've come accustomed to liking cannot be separated from whiteness, including hip-hop, as black as it is. Rap came into the focal front of our imagination because it was something white people felt that they could gain from. And by capitalizing on the influence of a culture that began in awkward spaces of oppression in the midst of urban America, white monopoly capital was able to push a culture using terms and concepts that black people created in the forefront of what the general global culture would become. And today, a lot of slang, a lot of fashion, a lot of language that people use just generally is actually something that emanates from the black experience. And via hip-hop. Hip-hop rappers are modern day poets because they've given the whole world a new language, a new slang. Hip-hop has given the world street fashion. Hip-hop has given the world an appreciation for new rhythms and movements and swagger that is undeniable. Hip-hop today transcends rock music. And as a result, we cannot be taking all of that in and not think that it's somehow not attached to some white people in the background getting a lot of money for it. But to zoom back into how this has anything to do with South Africa, Ubonga is special as an individual because everybody's special and they have something to contribute to the world. But his specialities were linguistic, and they were attached to the fact that hey, and his twang was something that couldn't be left in the streets, to the point where people literally felt the need to pluck him out, put him in recording studios, and make his life better as a voice-over artist. Because he had the cadence, he had the ability to project his character in a language which holds a lot of power. So when we talk language and power, are we not also talking rap? Can we separate rap from the politics of language and power? Is the fact that when most rap happens in English, and most rap happens in an English that comes from America, attached to the fact that as a result we learn to become empowered by things which are American and English in nature? I think so. And I think as a direct result, when we name our dopest MCs, a lot of the times, from South Africa, from you guys, talking to you guys, I hear a lot of a colonial conscience, where you think so-and-so is dope just because they're in proximity to a lot of the hip-hop you grew up listening to. The Biggies, the Nas, the Tupacs. So if somebody sounds the closest to that, we're most likely to revere and admire them. Not because they're actually bringing anything fundamentally new to the hip-hop dynamic, but because they sound so identical to what we aspire to be. And I'm going to name names. Would we enjoy the music of Nasty C if he wasn't such a masterful artist at mimicking American trap to the point where you can't even hear he is a kid from Durban? Would we admire an Aries if he wasn't so comfortable around adopting slang terms and accentuations that reflect a global landscape and you can't even tell that he's a kid from Pretoria? I'm gonna go even deep, and this might make you all angry. Would we admire Tumi if it wasn't for the fact that his history in being part of the struggle through his parents expressed the fact that he navigated through exile, which meant he spent time in America, which gives him a kind of naturally Americanized accent. So come time for him to be front and center in our stages, maybe it's not so much Stogie T's inflection and actual bars that resonate to us, but the fact that he feels exportable. The fact that when you hear an artist who is so close to what you've dreamed and understood as hip-hop, you vicariously identify with them. And because we feel like we live in a shithole country, maybe what we most of us want to do is escape Africa and jump into the American paradigm. And artists like Nasty C, Tumi and Aries reflect for us the ambitions to become anything but African. Is this what's happening? I don't know, tell me. Because I think there's a strong case to be made for the fact that there's a colonial conscience at work at South African hip-hop, and that what we need to do is decolonize that conscience. In other words, if SA hip-hop is going to grow any further than it has right now, we're going to have to decolonize SA hip-hop. Because I think the best of what we've done so far has been a reflection of who we are, not what the world in general is about. But let's go in decolonizing SA hip-hop, in decolonizing South African rap. One of the most important things that we have to start by doing is understanding that through all of the facets and elements of hip-hop, rap conveys something fundamentally political. It conveys a speaking and a communication. And you can't speak without attaching yourself to a culture. You know, this is something very resonant of what thinkers like Frantz Fanon used to speak of. The fact that you can't express yourself without expressing where you come from. And as a result, where you come from is a direct result of the values you hold true. And if those values are in any way attached to whiteness, you begin to grow out of your own indigenous context. And I want to accuse and actually direct this to South African hip-hoppers and say, guys, the reason that we aren't growing and developing as a culture, the reason that we find ourselves completely disgruntled and dissatisfied by anything SA hip-hop seems to do at a larger level, whether it be the Sahas or the massive festivals that we keep engineering for hip-hop's sake, the reason that hip-hop heads never seem to be thoroughly satisfied with what hip-hop has become is because we haven't addressed the issue of a language. Language is how hip-hop came to us via rap. And so let's put aside for an instance the language of movement. Let's put aside the language of how the hands scratch the decks when the DJ does his thing in the block party. Let's put, for instance, aside the language of how the graffiti artist tags on the wall, because those are also very critical to this discussion. But I want to focus on rap because it has taken a prevalent point in how we've understood the culture at large. Rap is seen as the great American phenomenon. Many would say the greatest American phenomenon. But at the very same time, rap is seen as an expression of African spirit. Because these are people who were dispossessed from their continent, made slaves, and found themselves navigating in a space where they were not fully expressing themselves for who they were. And as a result, rap is seen as one of those ways where Africans in the America were able to express this deep ancestral memory inside of them, to express something called hip-hop through movement, through sound, through power, through dance. And these are the aspects that make up the culture at large. And when this thing became so interesting that white America could buy into it, the only way that they could pluck it out of the context of black celebration and black joy is by taking the most viable aspect. And what could make money? You could not really make money from presenting somebody who did nothing but scratching old records in the party. You could not truly make money by presenting these guys who were doing new forms of dances by contorting their bodies and moving around and creating a kind of gymnastic dance movement on floors. You could not truly make money by promoting and endorsing these artists whose main canvases were decrepit buildings and everything that capitalism have left to ruins. But you could easily make money out of these jiggy rapping poet motherfuckers. Thus, we enter into the age of the rapper. The age of the rapper opens up a space where rap music, which they conveniently decided to call hip-hop, when hip-hop is just a larger culture and rap is an aspect, but you know, hip-hop music is now in the forefront and center of the MTV generation. We're going to the late 80s into early 90s, and we're peeking into the golden era. Every rapper that you know and love comes from this definitive era. Be it from Kool Herc to Kool Moe Dee, to P. Diddy, to Tupac, to Notorious B.I.G., to Big Pun, to everybody who contributed to what hip-hop could be, comes from this era of rap. And by the time we were living our lives, sitoitoya, hanging out placards, trying to understand whether they'd free Mandela or not, fighting with P.W. Porter, navigating the archetypes of apartheid, living around project buildings which were designed for our own oppression called locations, aka lokshin, trying to understand how our land was taken from us and the only thing we had left was small little yards in sections that were demarcated for us to simply go to urban areas to go to work and come back. But we were navigating through the whole that our soundtrack was American music. Whether the American soul of Lionel Richie, Curtis Mayfield, Marvin Gaye, evolving into the funk of James Brown, and eventually the hip-hop generation. What we heard was a sound which was coming from outside of our own scope, and we related to it because the messages were about struggle, because the mirror of blackness was shining deep into our own experiences. Whether you're in Soweto, Deep Kloof, Motherwell, Mlazi, you name it, every location. Your parents had the record, your parents had the cassette, the LP, the vinyl, and eventually the CD of these American black artists who helped bring forward a unified experience where we all understood that black people everywhere were experiencing the same thing in varying degrees. And this is how we took hip-hop in. From the first vinyls which were being smuggled into ships and being sent to Cape Town, to people who were affluent enough to share this music with their friends, and eventually this music making its way to Johannesburg and other key cities, to every friend who had money coming through and saying, yo, you heard that new hip-hop record? And the way that hip-hop came to us was through this navigating of power, of privilege, and eventually what became our pleasure. So I want to make y'all very aware of the fact that you didn't just love hip-hop. You loved hip-hop through a journey that had to pass through power, through a journey that had to pass through privilege in order for you to gain your pleasure. So if you think that you loving hip-hop can be detached from whiteness, racism, and thus colonialism, then you got another thing coming.
Ooh.
So to abantu basemza ansi,
It deeply, we.
abantu basemza ansi, if you love Wu-Tang Clan, man, well, I love Wu-Tang Clan in the 90s, I couldn't even hear half of what these niggas were talking about.
Yeah.
But I still learned every word of it. And as a result, my deep subconscious mind is ingrained to finding hip-hop said in English in a way that's more preferable. But I had to teach myself to question this value system, to say, man, I speak in a certain way that's resonant to indlela. And whether uring is Pitori, whether upagushalambombo, we all have a unique slang that originates from how our own hoods were designed. And I think it is rappers who have spoken to our unique experience. When POC decided to say, Yei Tada, when Pro decided to say, Ngapelu moya san, when Amu decided to speak in ways that were resonant of the Johannesburg township youth, they were all speaking to something which was cracking the code. They were decolonizing hip-hop. When Reddy D was scratching on a Mapaputi song, that was decolonizing hip-hop. When Chiscop was doing handstands and freestyling and doing their b-boy moves on Kwaito songs, that was decolonizing hip-hop.
Yeah.
When graffiti artists like Falco and Rasty and you name them were beginning to depict images which were reflective of our history and our culture, that was decolonizing hip-hop. So we come to the moment where if every American and any American who's ever stepped on South African soil has seen what hip-hop has done in its expression and its growth in this particular continent, in this particular country, Mzansi Africa, Azania if you want to be with it, has come to a realization of, man, we've come all the way, traveling from the United States to see a part of ourselves in a different way. And very famously, during Sprite's famed tour in bringing a lot of American rappers who came here and interacted with the JSEC massive rap camp.
Zotuga Zaka.
Zotuga, because they were told by, yo man, we wanted to see what y'all are doing. But all we hear is you being us. Are we still being them? Ask yourself this question. If Future heard Nasty C, would he hear anything new? If Drake heard Nasty C or Aries, would they hear anything spectacular that they felt they had to learn from? When Kendrick Lamar came to South Africa, toured Robben Island, entered into the crevices of our townships, understood the value and the soul and the history of South Africa, you know what that inspired? To Pimp a Butterfly. Where the references of Zulu and Xhosa and Robben Island and Mandela are littered throughout the whole album. And this is Kendrick. There have been many an African American in hip-hop traveling to this continent, seeing what we are about and being so inspired that it is in their music. Exactly. And all we talk about is sipping lean, I'm with this bitch, you capping, and everything American. And if all these cats can come through here and be so inspired that they take it back home, do we really think that by taking what they are bringing back to them, we're gonna grow as hip-hoppers? Whether you're in rap, graffiti, DJing, come on man. You can't bring value to anything anybody knows, even better than you, because they live that experience.
Yeah.
So let's go. So ultimately, again, I want to speak to you rappers, because you rappers have been the fundamental key to the growth of hip-hop. And you South African rappers, most of you, shout out to all those who've understood this. We've done GOAT pieces, links will be in the description. I think each and every GOAT we've done on the Headspace has reflected this authenticity of saying, bring hip-hop back to its root and let's South Africanize it. We've done pieces on album reviews, and a lot of these album reviews I get a lot of feedback, and a lot of young Gen Xers think that I'm hating on Aries and Nasty C, but this is my argument. My argument is, I know a lot of y'all are young and you live in a world where the global gate is literally immediate to your potential of what life has to offer. But the result is, guys, Mzansi Africa with all of its electricity issues and political dynamics and particular kind of ethnic challenges that demand for our stories to be told by us first. So if we are kind of jumping the wagon to tell stories that have nothing to do with us in ways that don't convey an audience that is directly to us, you're talking over people, and nobody likes being talked over. If you stand in front of somebody and you try to talk over them, you don't resonate with their heart. And I'm here saying Aries, Nasty C, and all of this generation that's been inspired by a direct Americanization of rap is talking over South Africa. And there's no way you'll win South Africa by talking over them. You are South African. And your South African experiences mean that somewhere deep in your DNA is Sobukwe, is Mandela, is Hani, is all of this different dynamic of what South Africa has been through. Is the electricity load shedding problems of Eskom, is the comedy of Joe Mafela and Trevor Noah. It's the fashion of Makosa Pailatuma, Ephraim or Utlale. It's Somi's Mhlongo, it's everything we've ever done as South African. It's our memes, it's our culture, it's our humor, it's Mbadada Zamazulu, it's Xhosa people, it's Zulu, it's Sesotho, it's Movango, it's generations, it's Solomake Kancube, it's Nando's, it's everything that we've ever contributed to the world. So if you ignore all of that, if you're sipping a bottle of Patron instead of a bottle of Cedric's Old Brown that everybody knows, come on, man!
You know, also
I
was talking with my little brother about the fact that
Stargazer.
Stargazer up at the back. I'm not the front. Fuck that shit. The fact that you have similar icons as I say states that have done the similar things up in Mzansi. So if you gonna reference Marcus Garvey or who's this as a freedom
As a freedom fighter, Martin Luther King,
or Malcolm UWP, but you can also talk about Ukrizani in the same sense. Then you have a conversation with an American like, yo, who the fuck is Chris Hani, yo? And then got a conversation but yo, he's the equivalent of Ubani.
You know what I'm saying?
You know?
That's a great point. Because you reach to, remember Morale?
Yeah.
Morale was one of the swaggiest, most American motherfuckers you could ever meet.
Yeah.
But Morale, when he did I Am,
Yo.
he said I am Marcus Garvey. I am Chris, even though he said Chris Honey. We'll forgive him for pronouncing honey like that honey you sip from bees.
Yeah.
But he did it. That was decolonization. That hook, Morale deciding to say Chris Honey, that's decolonization. In those moments where, as hip hop practitioners, we decide to bring the attention back to our own culture, you are decolonizing the culture.
So it's not even in the accent.
It's not even in the accent. It's the referencing.
Yeah.
And this is what most cats get wrong when I talk about authenticity. When we talk about the A word, they think we're saying, no.
Yeah.
We're saying, around so many different diverse aspects that Americans wouldn't know jack shit about.
Yeah.
And yet you choose to leave out all of this beautiful fantasy, reality, mythology, actuality, drama, tragedy, comedy that happens within your own scope of culture for talking about something that you feel a future or a young thug would relate to. If they call fine women dime pieces, and when you don't talk about Pakistan, if they talk about having fat asses, and when I just want to make another example. Let's look at certain things that Nigerians have done. Like the fact that they've popularized the use of calling an ass Inyash. You know, let's talk about how Afro beats has spread through the American imagination, and now a whiz kid and a burner boy is able to take things that come from a uniquely Nigerian place and make it American and make it global. And Americans are losing their minds trying to memorize Burna Boy lyrics. Don't you think we could do that with a KO? Don't you think we could do that with a Casper on your vest? I don't know. Don't you think we could do that from an AKA? I think we could. I think that if more SA hip-hop practitioners directly wanted to do something which spoke to their own unique indigenous context, we would start winning the game at greater levels. The reason we're not gaining respect from the world is because we're playing according to the games, the rules that the world has given us. We're not taking these rules and adapting them to the reality that we live. And if you look at who's ever really won the game, if there's any such thing as winning the game of imperialism and capitalism, it is people who have taken aspects of their culture and found a way to navigate it into commercial value by being authentic to the fact that every story, whether it's a German story, an Irish story, a Spanish story, a Mexican story, is the human story. That's why even in the Americas, blacks loved The Godfather, because it spoke to people who were oppressed coming into power. And hip-hop plays into a lot of mafioso tropes. You know what I mean? That's why the story of the Jews coming as people who are a legitimate minority, making power and creating the empires of Hollywood and everything that we now know today as modern day Western media is inspiring. So what happens to South Africans? What happens to South Africans who are now in the squalor, navigating and trying to expand their culture to greatest heights? What happens to a Trevor Steedman, a Black Coffee, a Trevor Noah, at the heights of their careers, by being themselves, by expressing the culture that they come from, and attracting people like Swiss Beats to buy a Maposa by Latuma item? Why can't hip-hop learn from that? Why are we still trying to play to American rules? And look, I'm not saying don't wear Timberlands, don't wear FUBU. I'm saying that do that in a way that expresses who you are. Because like they said back in the 90s, yo, hacemos states, man. And we might have taken that as a diss to us, but really it was a caution. It was a warning. It was saying to us that if we're going to be great at anything, it's going to be understanding who we truly are. If so, boniswa, it's going to be through seeing a vision that's truly ours. If we're going to be great, it's going to be by manufacturing products that speak to an aspect of what we have truly gone through. If we're going to play the game that capitalism has laid to us and be able to navigate in it effectively, it's going to be through understanding how we can filter in aspects of our core identities. So South Africans, I'm talking to you, South African hip-hop fans, the breaker, the DJ, especially you rappers, the graph artists. We are not winning because we are still playing according to the global game. And when we play according to our rules, then we begin to see the change. We've seen this. We've seen this through the AKAs, the Questas, basically anybody who sat next to Sway. We've seen this through our best being exported in the world. Java winning a BET award. We've seen how this can manifest itself. We've seen how Ebro, Peter Rosenberg, and all of these global American hip-hop talking heads can find the interest in Africa when Africans begin to be interested in themselves. So honestly, I'm just here to talk to hip-hop heads and point to y'all and say, yo man, you can either be inspired by America or you can try to be America. And I think a lot of us have been doing the latter. Because in being inspired by America, you take what America has done and you navigate it and you try to find a place for it in your own unique African experience. But if you're trying to be American, you do a cut and paste situation. Where you think just by merely mimicking, just by merely imitating, you're bound to be recognized. So talk to me in the comment section if you don't agree. With people around me, and before we conclude this, if anybody, yo man, I got my homies, you know, I got my names out Chingland, Frank, you know what I'm saying? Let's talk about this issue from so many levels. Talk to us in the comment section. If you say Vijay, you did Gaga, if you say Vijay, you're onto something, please talk to me, because I don't think we can go any further if we don't realize these issues. No, you guys something to say, fam?
No, I've always wanted to talk about the references. The references. For the mere fact that a track states even. So I always go back to that. You remember when you were talking about AKA, where he's like, I was running around in a buggy. He said truck. So when an American is asking you,
Toyota Bucky?
Yeah, so
is that a Toyota Bucky?
So like, yo, what the fuck is a Bucky? He's like, yeah, it's an equivalent of what you guys call a truck.
You know what I'm saying?
So when you're rapping, we're not telling a truck. Probably an American doesn't know what we're telling because a truck, to us, it's a what do they call it? They call it SUV. What I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we're talking about nappies, they're talking about diapers.
Yeah, that's the thing.
There are certain linguistic things that you can't ignore in how we've taken in American cultures. They're talking about the projects.
Yeah.
You know? They're talking about a pistol. You know, a Glock or whatever, man. There's certain references to things that we recognize. That shit. So when they're talking about this, they're talking about ipatu. You know?
Yeah.
You know when they're talking about drip, they're talking about unkulo, Jewish. You know? So come on, man. Our slang is beautiful. And I feel like for the best of SA rap has expressed that. We did a GOAT piece, whether Kulichana is the GOAT or not. Kulichana is one of those MCs who front and center spoke the slang of South Africa. Pro kid spoke in a language, and this is no diss to Verb as well spoke in an English that was very inspired by an American rapper. We all know who that is. But he brought it back to a place where he was
a better version of that rapper.
You know what I mean? His referencing was back home.
Yeah.
His referencing was about what do we deal with in the South African context.
So all in all, the rappers must. It's not about rapping in vernac.
It isn't about rapping in vernac. It's about this. Finally, here's my final thought, Takeza.
Yeah.
When you think in your own mind, what language do you think in? What language do you speak to yourself in? What are the terms and concepts and imagination that you use to navigate your own scope? Because there's no way that escapes where you come from. As mixed and as varied and as influenced by global influences it is, it becomes something unique. When you talk to your mother or your father, what tone, what accent do you speak in? When you talk to your friends, the ones you went to school with, when you talk to your girlfriend, when you talk to your wife, your husband, when you talk to all of these people who you love, how do you speak? Because the way you speak to yourself is called thought, but the way you speak to others is called communication. So finally, I want to speak to the rappers. I want to say, rap how you speak. Because it's evident when you're not. It's evident when you're putting on an accent and speaking in references that are immediate to anything you'd be saying to your little daughter or son or your mother.
Kind of takes me back to the recent review you did on Ohave, where he sounds different when he raps in English than when he raps in
I've done a lot of these reviews where I talk to accent, and in the comment section, brothers and sisters be accusing me of trying to fundamentalize what it being African means. A very noteworthy hip-hop practitioner accused me of being mystical and pointing to some ideal African value that doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, then we don't exist, because our experiences are real, they're valid, they're here. Yeah. We have all kinds of different slangs and experiences, and I for one think that the same way that all the variations of what Africans in America
and we're gonna get a time.
Yeah. Name.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna name you.
Yeah. So ultimately,
I was gonna ask something. So do you accent is not an issue to you?
No, accent is not.
It's actually about the references.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting because you made a point about Utumi.
Yeah.
You said a lot of people gravitate towards him because of his accent.
Yeah.
Enunciation.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you mentioned the sway freestyle and whatnot. If ever you listen to that, he made a lot of references about Africans.
Yeah. From Nigeria to Fela,
yeah,
to our own unique struggle. You see, this is what I'm talking about. Let's just adjust a bit.
But for a minute, I thought maybe.
No.
Okay.
My issues with Tumi / Togi T are in the fact that a lot of his references will be things that the everyday South African cannot access. And when I say cannot access, I mean Tumi's a learned man. He's well read.
Yeah.
He's well referenced, and as a result, he understands hip hop, because hip hop, particularly rap music, is an art of referencing. You talk about the things you know in the ways that you're familiar with it. And a lot of Tumi's references come from books, shows, and aspects of life that not a lot of people would be exposed to. And I accuse most Tumi fans of liking Tumi, not because Tumi is actually fundamentally dope, because he really is. But a lot of his fans like him not because of that dopeness, but because of the fact that he sounds very close to what they're used to.
No Elias is one of those, because he'll be like, he made me read something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my thing about Tumi is that
he made me.
There's power to introducing people to things that they don't know. But the thing about Tumi is that he'll do that in a way that a lot of people just don't even get there. Because if they don't have the direct access to English, they miss the reference, and they still feel it's mind-boggling because Tumi just sounds so close to what they're used to. So if Tumi is watching this episode for some reason, Tumi is an apologetic scapegoat of how South Africa's rap has evolved. But my issue is the politics around Tumi. Tumi says a lot of problematic shit about South Africa and about the way we live, because I feel like a lot of shit he hasn't lived through, and as a result I feel people miss those nuances about the way Tumi raps because they're too interested in his accent and they're too interested in a lot of the things that he talks about that have an international appeal. And I think Tumi's smart enough to know that when he was sitting with Sway, he can't talk about America. He needs to talk about Africa. But he's also smart enough to know that when he's talking to us, he can't talk about America. Because we don't fucking know the difference. And that's the fuck that we are. We dumb as shit because we're busy colonizing ourselves. I love y'all. And ultimately what I want to say is that hip-hop is an expression of what we love. So if we are taking in the fashion, taking in the movement, taking in the culture, taking in the language, man, I've said nigga here more times than I can even conceive because I identify with the word, you know, and many other terms that come from the ebonics of the African in America. But I'm able to do that in a way that speaks to all of these other nuances of me being a South African. So again, I'm not directly pointing at anybody's accent, but I'm saying that the accent plays a role in how you authentically sound. You know, you can hear somebody putting something on. You know, when somebody tries to nasal the way that they talk, and they try to play into what they think is sophistication linguistically. So a lot of times I'll be pointing at MCs who are doing that. MCs who are playing to what they feel is sophistication. When you can directly hear that this person is even struggling to put this thing on. It's a terrible act. You know? It's like watching Denzel Washington play Biko. It's a brilliant portrayal, but he can never get the South African accent right.
Yeah.
So you admire the portrayal, but you can never respect it. And this is my thing with SA rap. It still feels like an American in a movie about South Africa. It feels like watching Idris Elba play Madiba. Aries sounds like a South African trying to play Drake. You know what I mean? So these are the kind of dynamics I'm trying to point to. So yeah, ultimately, talk to me in the comment section. The headspace has been...
And it's only the episode. Fuck it.
It's been fucking... But we had to.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if we don't rap how we speak, graph how we speak, scratch how we speak, live how we speak, and just resonate from the heart, then I truly do feel SA Hip Hop is going nowhere. You know?
Yeah.
So if SA Hip Hop is to go somewhere significant, powerful, and if we are to even ever export an artist who will become the global powerful hip hop artist, then it'll be through these principles. It'll be through authenticity, fundamentally. My name is Viwe Joka, the brother from the ancient mother. I've had my brothers out there in the background supporting me. No earlier shot to Fritz Croyd out there, my tongue win. And
he's asleep.
It's been a beautiful journey, yo. So what's up?
Peace.
Viwe Joka, the brother from the ancient mother. It's been an honor and pleasure throughout these years, to really give you South Africa's most poignant hip hop content. Now, December, December, hello December, we're celebrating with hip hop heads. It's the One Room Headspace Cypher, 30th of December, 6 o'clock. If you love hip hop, if you love that boom bap, that punch, that slam, that rap, if you think you can rap for us, you stand a chance to win an artist EP package. What does that mean? It means 3 songs of your own choosing, mixed, mastered, recorded by us, album art provided. Basically, you get to have that jump start that I think a lot of rappers would want to have when putting themselves across out there in the scene. But anyways, we're celebrating hip hop, we're celebrating the culture. It's the Headspace doing it for you. So please, 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 those who have the time, the energy, the willingness, the fire for it, catch us front and center, live and direct at the place to be. Much love, keep supporting the Headspace, keep subscribing. We got this far because of you, and we just want to celebrate it all. We only got one life, and we live this one life in the context of the culture, in all its beauty, in all its glory. Love y'all.